Hello, this is Joe Wetzel again with Worldographer and showing off some of the new city mapping functionality. And this is sort of an addendum to our previous video where I went over that in a lot more detail. I wanted to point out two things here, though. Is one, if you're picking up the license key for the city functionality, for the settlement functionality, you would go here to enter it, and it'll give you a dialog to enter the license code. You can also update the Worldographer license this way as well, but that's also going to prompt you when you start up. The other thing I wanted to show you was in the new city functionality is the process of quickly going over creating one step by step. So in this case, we're just going to say create a blank map, and that's just going to only use the background texture or color, whichever we choose. But this gives us a lot more power in a way that we can kind of tweak things as we go along. Let me change this grid, or turn it off rather, since it gets a little distracting. To do it kind of a step-by-step process, we go to the Generate menu up here, and it's got all the things that we might want to have auto-generated in the course of a city map, since we've got this set to create a new city map. What we've got, generally what you would do is you'd start with a coastline if you want one, so we're going to start with that. And again, I've got my window kind of set up to be a little small so that we can record at the proper screen size, and so you're not trying to zoom into the video if you've got a smaller screen than what I've got. But anyway, so again, the clock positions, the numbers here represent clock positions. So 12 to 4 is going to create one from the top of the map to the right side, a little bit further than halfway down. So we can go ahead and hit OK. It tells me that it's done. We can refresh this, and you can see it on the mini map up here. You can also zoom out and get a feel for what it looks like as well. We can also Control Z that and then refresh it. And it's not refreshing the mini map automatically. It's not designed to, but we can do it again. And here, if we wanted to do the entire right side of the map, you could go 12 to 6, hit OK, and refresh, and you can see it came up with something rather odd, but you can tweak it as well. You can also do your own coastline by just making these shapes. Let me do another one, because I wasn't really crazy about that. Let's do like 2 o'clock, or rather 10 o'clock. Let's do roughly the top part of the map. 10 to 2, okay. Okay, refresh so you can see what we've got. So anyway, that's doing the coastline for us. Zoom in a little bit more, just for the heck of it, but then generate a river. So if you want to have a river and we want to have it go towards the top of the map, and we want to have it start from the bottom roughly, we can do that. Okay, refresh here, and you can see what it came up with for that. So that's doing that, and you can undo and redo that as well. Main roads. So I showed you in the prior video the very ordered layout for roads and so forth. Windiness. So if you set this to 0, it's going to have no windiness at all. It's going to make them straight lines. We're going to make it 1, 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock, 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock. I don't know. Let's go 4 to 9, and let's go to 6 to 12. No, not 6 to 12, because that's going to kind of intersect too much with the river. So let's go 7 to 1. Let's try that out. Okay, so it said it created them, and refreshing the mini map kind of gives you an idea of where they wound up. It cuts them off so that they don't go across the ocean, but it does allow you to have bridges essentially. So that's done. Then we can generate a wall. Generating a wall at this point is going to not make a lot of sense because of where the river is placed. It's kind of close there, but we'll do it anyway. I like to have more area in my inside of the wall, so I'm going to do 17. We'll see what that turns out with. 8 towers. Generating the wall is done, and so you can see where that comes up, and you can have a portion of, and I don't mind that. I don't mind having a water source for inside the wall, kind of. Although I suppose that could be poisoned or blocked up or something, but I don't mind that. You can have grates underneath the wall to make sure people can't swim through and stuff, and still protect things and still have water going through there. So yeah, we'll leave it. Next would be generating the streets. So I want to have random will randomly pick between these. I want to have a haphazard layout because I just happen to like that. And I know with having the city wall, that's going to kind of work out a little bit better. The skip percentage isn't actually used in this case for this layout. It gets used for the ordered and very ordered layouts. But you know, so if you're using those layouts, you use the skip percentage. Here it doesn't matter. Going to keep the cobblestone layout or texture rather. Hit OK. And so let me zoom out more so you get a better view of that. Now I'd actually like to have more streets inside of here. I could see, you know, looking at some historical maps of city centers, actually you did have large park areas and stuff inside the city center in some cases. Yeah, so let me hit Control Z now, then do generate the streets again. Let's make it haphazard again, 150 still. Let's do 200. Now, what's happening though is behind the scenes is sometimes there's collisions with existing roads that won't make sense, where it tries to weed out some of those, although it's not perfect. And so it might not place 200. And when we were doing, but at least this will try a few more times than when we had 150. So we hit OK, and now, yeah, so I do have more streets inside of here, and we still have some large areas that could be parks later, or we can also, the advantage here is that we can go to the shapes drawer, and we could, like I can, just so that I get all the settings properly set, just so I get all the settings properly set, I like to select one currently, and then I hit deselect, and I want to create a new line, essentially, so I can do 1, 2, 3, you know, I can come out like that, and then I can start another one, and so I can find some other portion of this that, you know, doesn't have, I can come out like this, and I can do another one like, let's say we wanted to go from here all the way out to here. Anyway, so you get the idea. I don't want to get into the weeds of creating the city for the demo purposes that we've got here. Generate. So then we got the place buildings. That's the next step that we've got. And right now we've got 5,000. We're going to set it to dense. Actually, I'm going to set it to have a larger city. So we'll set it to 15,000, and we'll see what we get back here. And so we've got a little dialog. So it's actually doing a little less than 4,000 buildings, because based on that population size, we kind of divide by, I think divide by 4, and then we add some other things back in for the specialty buildings, and you end up with that number, 3795. The initial ones placed are a lot easier than the later ones because we're getting a lot more collisions with existing buildings. We've got to check to make sure, hey, not only do we have to do all the math, the geometry for figuring out, okay, here's the slope of the road that you're placing the building adjacent to, and so here's the rotation for that building, but then we also have to make sure that we're not colliding with any other buildings. We have to make sure that we're not colliding with any roads. We have to make sure that we're not overlapping water, for example. All these different calculations are happening behind the scenes, and so it takes, you know, a minute or two, but you know, that's not a bad price to pay for something like this, where you can have a city spun up in just a couple of minutes, like we're saying. Also, the fact that we click dense adds to the time to create our city. The reason for that is that by doing dense, it's trying to place the buildings close together many times over and kind of moving them just a little bit further apart. And so what we ended up with is that we kind of gave up after we hit 3750. Didn't quite get those last few in this map area, but that's not a bad thing. You know, it's pretty good to have what we've got. And so we end up with a map like this. Pretty cool. Once you get beyond a certain distance, you can see that it's not trying to do the dense buildings over here, whereas it does do them in here. And then the final step is to generate vegetation, and so here we can add deciduous, evergreen, and tropical vegetation, and I'm just going to take the defaults there for the moment, and it just takes a moment to do that. And refresh, yeah, refresh is going to show us our street networks, but it's not showing us every individual building. The idea is that refresh needs to be drawn pretty quickly. It can be a large area, so we don't want to burden it. But yeah, so that's our city. And as I said, you know, like the prime real estate up here. So our city center happened to be a little bit further away from the coastline. So you could add more streets up here before building placement. That's the whole point. Like I said, the nice thing about doing your city generation in this step-by-step way of using the generate menu allows you to add in extra streets and edit the streets before you go on to placing the buildings. So again, I hope that the tool is really useful for you. Again, if you haven't seen the first video, please go back to the other one where I go over all the details that are being generated about all these buildings. You can pull up, you know, show all the notes, and all these little rectangles, all these squares, yellow squares, are notes about what happens to be in that building, and you can go to that view edit note and you can pull up a dialog which tells you what that particular building has for sale if it's a store, or who lives there if it's not, as well as just the details of doing everything in one step, and the configure menu where you've got the configure settlement data here that allows you to drive that screen of what's for sale and who lives in the different buildings, as well as the placement of what building types get placed in your city is all here. And so I go over those things in detail, as well as this screen to create your city in the prior video. So thanks for your attention, thanks for your interest, and as I said, you know, hope you're able to make some good useful maps out of this. Thanks again.